at 4 minutes. I'll post that. 23, this is 24. I'll continue. It's the infrastructure, Captain. Hoping my graphics card can handle this. I've offloaded laptop. Enough said. Satellite network linear segment, the center. What is desirable about the center? You must say, ew, I hate the center of the city. But it is a place of ideas, a place of cultural diversity with lowercase c and d, meaning workable, practical, a place of integrating the gene pool or diversifying the gene pool for young people, place of spectacle, place of Epicureanism, great restaurants, good food, critical thought, people who read, are literate, educated, tend to be. It's a city of strangers, too, which is a plus, especially if you come from an oppressive local setting, parochial setting, where you know everyone, you know everyone's business. That's usually the one thing everyone says coming from the hinterlands. And during the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, into the 50s, there was that great influx, or typical influx, Day of the Locusts into LA, and the film center creating spectacle, simulacrum, the film industry, new, technological, the war production, aeronautics industry of the 40s brought jobs, brought pretty girls, handsome boys from the Midwest, Dust Bowl, story as old as time. Same stories happen in Babylon, same stories happen in Rome. If you read Suetonius, some of Cicero, certainly the Livy, the lives of the emperors, Gibbon, same thing. What is the cause? The city of strangers is an attractive place, mostly. Strangers in weak ties can offer you jobs. Family, friends in strong ties, usually by mathematics, have, in Steven Anderson's book, The Power Law, or The Long Tail, usually, and connected life, mathematical life of things and a connectivity, usually don't have the wherewithal to get you jobs. It is strangers, ironically, mathematically proven in this math of emergence, that are the people who can help you through jobs. It's a mystery. It avoids the nepotism we do still see in the Mediterranean countries, which is, I know a number of Mediterranean people, Spanish, Italians, who moved to New York and said, wow, got a job. Go figure. City of Strangers is a desirable place. It can be an alienating place at times, but so can the city of the familiar, the oppressive parochial. Satellite network linear segment. What is that gridded area? How juicy is it? How desirable is it? Moving on. These are social events during COVID. We went over this before. Look, upper right, my other class, and perhaps I'll get you involved. Designing a nightclub. How would we design nightclubs post-COVID? How would we increase this desire, this Epicurean desire, the desire to be in a space, I'll call it a space of serendipity. Create the nightclubs, see a concert, indoor party, indoor bar, sports arena, church, buffet, a hug, attending a wedding, all these things that we often hold as arrivals in our constant life of departures. Time flies and then we die. And we have scant means or places in between to create a sense of arrival. Hope I don't get throttled. Moving on, open area, blind area, hidden area, unknown area. This is the realm of the reposition. This is the realm of the stranger. What will we encounter? Known by self, known by others, unknown by self, known by others, the city. That's our blind area. unknown by others, known by ourselves? Are we a fugitive from the provincial areas? As in the wonderful book, what's it called? The Madman in the White City, about the Chicago World's Fair, and a psycho killer who was preying on young agrarian women and murdering them. Very famous account. I saw the documentaries. I started the book. Interestingly, build this ideal city spectacle, and within it is a psycho. Some of the events, the Olympic events, the Olympics of 1972, the Atlanta Olympics, they're often worried about the Olympics not just being places form of terrorism, but attracting other sort of entities, undesirable entities. So city and its strangers are places of the Jungian shadow, almost unavoidable. But whereas people in the hinterlands tend, gross generalization, avoid their shadow self and that Jungian self, the shadow mentor saying, it's all right to think, but don't do it. The Devil in the White City was the case of the psycho killer killing the young, unsuspecting women from the farms who came to Chicago during the World's Fair. We continue to have these big events where things happen. There is a repressed shadow side out, mass shootings, things like that, or explosion of the shadow self. Unknown area, unknown by both. If you create spectacle of a stranger city, filled with spectacle, filled with fragility, what is that unknown fragility? Could a storm take that? Is in New Orleans. What did happen after Hurricane Katrina? What did happen after COVID, and what did happen after the Minneapolis riots in the George Floyd murder? Brutally, interestingly, brutally, unflinchingly recorded on a personal smartphone and sent to the world. It was clearly a case of this unknown area, the shadow self, the suspected police brutality, killing a man in 8 minutes, strangulation, and having that broadcast around the world and the shot heard around the world affected every downtown in North America, at least. Okay, moving on before we get throttled. I like these things. These, hold on, let me flip it down, flip it up, flip it small. This idea of ordering space from Alberti, facades, volumes, things like that. We do have specialists making our spaces, architect, urbanists, often kind of prissy, elitist, Epicurean individuals who are telling us how, where, why, what we should live. That's the whole general criticism of modernist architecture on your viewing list. But also, I do like cities as specialists. I do like reputation systems. I do like out of representation, reproducibility, and legitimacy. I do like, to a certain extent, specialist legitimacy. It is cool if you can approach. This is a quick crib notes on how facades are divided up according to divine proportions in Alberti from Vitruvius of the Romans, brought forward into the rationalist architects of modernity, Bauhaus, Mies van der Rohe, and into the postmodernist construction, back into the modernity of micro dwellings and so forth. At least you can live in this pure geometry, is the concept. And we go back to the local, my coffee cup. What, where, when, how do we see design? What is it telling me about the journey? What is it telling me about the arrival? Getting a coffee cup, don't really like Starbucks, but getting a cup at morning coffee as an arrival, but also a departure. Much can be said in this design. What's it trying to tell us? This is only temporary. To give you a jag, you can get on your way, you can work, you can walk through your city. Very unusual for America. Koreans Korean society don't really like this to chew and walk and eat, and Italians don't really like this either. I know those two countries intimately. I'm saying a very general thing. But Americans love it. New Yorkers love it. I love it. I like drinking a coffee on the street. I like sitting on a park bench, wolfing down a $5 or $8 sandwich because I gotta eat, want something fairly nice. I don't want to pay for the rest. I gotta go. And I got my cell phone right there. So we're trying to think, what does the cell phone say about arrival? What does post-COVID say about arriving back to the public sphere we were missing? How much fun is left in just a coffee cup in the morning, walking, thinking about life from vector A, in a vector from point A to point B? Writing, blah, blah, blah. Here's the situationists who were kind of Marxist, anarchist architects, cultural leaders, filmmakers like Debord, wrote Society of Spectacle. What is the fragile city in the time of riots? As we saw, we had a response to the emptying of the city core into the suburbs, largely through projects by Robert Moses, developed, no surprise, with a narrative of what women should be, what non-white people should be, implicit. Famous case of Moses lowering the bridges on the parkway so that buses and public transportation, presumably carrying non-suburban, non-Caucasian people, to the beaches, to the public beaches. They had to take another route. This was printed in black and white in certain passages in Robert Moses' account. The Fort Hamilton Parkway sliced right through an Irish neighborhood, which he did not like the cops and firemen who were already inhabiting this, Irish cops and firemen inhabiting this kind of Irish ghetto over here. So this is Debord's idea of mental mapping, the derive moving through the city. What are those? Out of the coffee cup, we get these little red lines. What, where, when, how can we combine departure and arrival? What do you think about the dichotomy of departure and arrival? What form of education did you get telling you you're nothing until you arrive? Oh, and by the way, you'll never arrive. Your life will be a series of suspended gratification. Don't form your own critical thoughts. Don't have an original thought because we'll fill you with thoughts. And what we're filling you with is a sense of departure, loosely put. But Paul Virilio, I was reading about city walls, that they were not entirely about the other, the enemy, keeping the enemy out of the, because they took over decades to build some city walls, like Rome's Aurelian walls are famous, built again for 1,000-year return of the Celts from France, the Gauls and the Celts, the primitive people, to sack and pillage the city. The sack of Rome happened around, I think, around the 1500s, where the mercenaries meant to protect meant to protect the cities, actually rebelled and sacked the city themselves. The Pope had that long corridor to go to Castile from the Vatican. What else about this? The Ringstrasse around Vienna was pulled down and they turned it into a park upon the advent of artillery, which got over the sense that the city walls define the space. Certainly by the post-World War I, the idea of bombing from the air created the sense of the fragile city. Above all, the city was entirely fragile. I grew up in the last part of the Cold War. We were always on edge whether this was the big one. That political, it was in a sense because of this ideological conflict in societies that were strangely a lot alike each other. Sort of command and control capitalism, command and control socialism are very similar, but formed a pedagogical difference. Domino thing about which countries of East Asia Southeast Asia would become communist, creating this domino effect, creating proxy wars, general terrorism on a large scale through nuclear bombing, and it created ultimately the city as fragile. So let's credit Moses with the idea that what is a survivable city? This is what we talk about in post-COVID urbanism, is like, what is a survivable city? Wall Street Journal said this area I live in, Windsor Terrace, was highly desirable because it's between parks, and it remained unchanged during COVID. We're like, what? Unchanged? I used to see ambulances down every one of these streets during COVID, 1,200 dying a night. There you go. It was kind of real estate hype. Ethics, responsibility, participation, democracy, an ideal. Is it an ideal? The Greeks, who invented it for a bunch of men, women, and slaves. Slaves were treated very brutally. Unlike the Roman slaves, who could be set free or buy their freedom. Also, what, where, when, how did chattel slavery disappear, where we needed the caloric value of the muscle power? Same caloric value in building the great cathedrals. Where did it go? One contention by Brodel is it went straight into Christianity, that you sacrifice in this life for the other life, that Christianity eliminated the spectacle of blood sports in the Colosseum, killing animals, killing human beings, but the building projects were still immense. Who feeds the builders? That's the big question about fragile cities. It's people carrying food in. Just as great standing armies, who supplies the supply chain? In ancient armies, there were huge supply trains of food, repair shops, and prostitutes that would follow these great armies into East Asia, and some of the great accounts in Thucydides and Herodotus talk about just what the supply trains were. Xerxes in Herodotus just marching this 1,000,000-man army into, it's probably hyperbole, marching it across the Bosphorus into Greece through Thermopylae. Cheesy recent film was The 300 about that event. Okay, moving on in the thing. Semiotics, temporal access, paradigmatic access, symptomatic access. This is all like how we make sense out of a model of what happens culturally, like building a modernist building. What is that? Is it a response to a paradigm? Is it a syntagmatic act by individual starchitect? Or how does that fit? Or how does that fit in a temporal sense? The pendulum swings. Pendulum of COVID, of certainly our President 45 to 46 has swung, and with it, so do the attitudes. But really, do these attitudes just go underground like the beatniks out of the Eisenhower era, straight-jacketed America? Where do dissenting opinions go? Do they really go underground, or they transform into others? The Jim Crow laws in the South, where did that really go? There was no protest. Here's an interesting theory of the Civil War, that, the North freed the South in largely an economic war, a war against the divisiveness of England as a power set to divide this rival North America. They framed it in terms of a moral framework with slavery. Lincoln did not free the slaves until the very end of the war. Strange things that are counter to what you read in history books. But another one with the rebellion of Joe Turner, there's a theory that slaves would have rebelled so much that would have taken care of the problem, with no extra help from northern white armies. Who knows? Different ideas. What if England and France had gone fascist? France, in a sense, did with the Vichy government. What if? Alternative histories. What are happening in these things? Theory evolutionary, we don't need it. These are moral theories, relativist morality, cultural, contractual base, particular universalism, Kant, will your maxim to which it shall become universal law, meaning you ought to do things, and symmetrical anthropology, let's just call this kind of like the utilitarian argument, analyze the ends and then back up to the means. Kind of a kit bag. Let's move on. What we say when we say things with our cities, what we say when we say things with our internet as a collective project. We give a signal, we surround, look at this, field of experience in the sender and receiver. Interesting enough, the whole storming of the Capitol steps, still a lot of people went like, where'd this come from? Unless the feedback loops that the internet and frankly the city as a sensibility creates itself. I go back to Minnesota and they say, how is it, what is it like living in the city? I've been living here for 30 years. Same as the beginning as it is now. Why hasn't that, after the proliferation of the internet, why does that question still arise? I don't know. Provincial world against cosmopolitan, threat by one side to the other. The threat of COVID threatened the cosmopolitan world of centralized urbanism. Were they better off? No, they have to live with each other and separate. Also, COVID taught us a lot. Environment, person, stresses, stressor appraisal, tension, response. An important graph, but not for us. Elusive tourism, what you can do when you get the short end of the sticks. Let me move it over. From Wikipedia, there needs to be an affection, a bond, limerent, non-limerent, define relationships between these dyads within the city, out of the city, with your parochial setting, your provincial setting, your cosmopolitan setting. Limerent bond is defined relationships in which both partners are limerent. What's limercy? These operations on the right. We get the short end of the stick. The suckers pay off. Are we nice? Say, turn the other cheek, whack. Do we retaliate? Kind of the macho response, tit for tat. Do we forgive, which Sapolsky said is the underlying driving game theory source of all living things? There must have been a signal error. You don't really mean to give me the sucker's payoff. I realize it. I hope you realize it. Let's try this again. That's the forgiving tit for tat prisoner's dilemma, which if it weren't, we'd bring entire societies to a standstill. Cuban Missile Crisis was a case of this, when both sides blinked, looked at each other. According to The Fog of War, the great movie about McNamara, he said there had to be someone drunk on the other line over in Russia that said, no, whatever, stop it. Very interesting moment in the height of almost blowing up the Western world in a conflict over missiles being placed into Cuba. Kennedys, both of them not wanting to appear tough guys against communism, but they were liberal Democrats, also rich boys. And coming to that forgiving state, why we didn't blow ourselves up then remains to be seen whether we do now. Non-envious. We don't envy the person who gives us the sucker's payoff. Why? I don't know. Life goes on. Life's too short. The last quality is being non-envious. Okay, moving on. Time, space, future expectations. Look at that on the right. Imaginary space, imaginary. We're talking about center, periphery, the city of strangers. Why this is cool. Why this is not provincial. Why would we want to leave our little farms or woods or hunting, gathering with our sheep to go into the city? Why would we want, as an attractive man or woman whose friends said, oh, you should be a new movie star, you should be Henry Fonda, you should be Brad Pitt, go into Hollywood? Why young men and young women in the Dust Bowl America 30s went to Hollywood, as in Nathaniel West's Day of the Locust. Great short story. Also, Miss Lonely Hearts, great author about urban, rural, center, periphery ideas. Imaginary space, imagination. That's where we want to go. Future expectation in time, past memory, far away. We want to leave that stuff behind in space. So we go to the city of strangers, the fragile city of strangers. Nathaniel West always talks about the fragility of cities. I know I'm rounding my algorithms, alienation, escape, witnessing, capture, collaborate, defect. These are cool things that resonate with, in, for the city of strangers. The huge, vulnerable, fragile, interesting, spectacular, diverse, sexy, engaging, Epicurean city of strangers. We go for the strangers. We get jobs from the strangers. We marry the strangers. This is proven for 6,000 years. Now we're making the transition into the internet. Will this continue to be the case? I think I am about at throttle point with this film, and I will continue with that idea.